You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it. All right, this one is, I don't know where this one's going to go, but obviously the tragic events of what has occurred at Bondi on Sunday. We can't take away from those tragic events, and my heartfelt condolences to everybody impacted by that absolute tragedy that occurred. But there has been literally lightning speed attack on firearms owners and their rights, which is, it's frankly concerning that we have our Premier, our Prime Minister talking about making our gun laws stricter, when I honestly think this has been a massive failure on the government's part here. And we'll discuss that tonight. So I thought I'd get someone back who I love to bounce my ideas off, who's extremely knowledgeable in this. And he currently ran for a spot down there as the local candidate for Kiama. So Felix, welcome back, mate. How are you?
Yeah, big picture. Thank you for having me. I've been better. There's a bit going on. But thank you for having me. I think it's a good time to have this discussion. And yeah, hopefully give some people some ideas that might help them get a bit of a direction as to how to feel a little bit more involved and hopefully get a bit more clarity on what's going on.
Mate, so I don't even know where to start here because there's just so much, and it's moving with lightning speed. We've gone from, we're recording this on Wednesday night, and I'm hoping to have this out hopefully tonight, but we've had just a mass influx of comments out in the media from the get-go, watching the questions of the media to our politicians, to our police commissioner, to everybody in line there, was all focused on guns, firearms, taking firearms away, reform, we need it, and Port Arthur. They're pretty much have been the talking points here, which is quite concerning because I don't think it's firearms owners that should be in the spotlight here. I think it should be that people who are involved in terrorist activities like we've uncovered here, like all these things are alleged, but it seems to be pretty clear that we have an individual here who had strong ties to his son, who is was on a terrorist watch list, part of a terrorist organisation that is well known here in Australia, and somehow that person was able to live in the same household as a licensed firearm owner, which we'll talk about the sort of restrictions here because I am absolutely baffled that someone who is on a terrorist watch list can be living in the same house as someone who has firearms and nothing was done to restrict, prevent, take. And we had a bit of a chat off air, and we were talking about you're at a barbecue and there's a bit of a threat or a fight. There's a high chance police are knocking on your door, taking your firearms, and you've got to provide a letter in 28 days saying why you need to get them back. Yet we're on a terrorist watch list for this bloke, and his son's on a terrorist watch list, living in the house, and play on. Like, what the hell?
What the hell's about the only thing you can say to it. There is so much to unpack with the failings of the existing systems and the existing firearms laws, that the call for new laws and new reform and all of the everything on top of it, in my opinion, is horrifying. We haven't even had the funerals of the people who have been killed and had appropriate time for any of it. And aside from a couple of really choice photo op things of shaking hands with people in hospital beds and all of the other good stuff they run around and do, there was no time of any consideration of anything other than let's get the guns. And the more they reveal to try to excuse their reasonings behind it, for anyone paying attention to it, the more they reveal their own failings. My belief off the bat, as soon as the links to ISIS for the son came out, was that they had screwed the pooch royally, and ASIO and our other security agencies must have dropped the ball and not known. The timeline that's now been revealed by New South Wales Police raises more questions. From what they've revealed, and this is me just ad-libbing things that have come out in the last while. It's been a bit of a maelstrom, having been involved in multiple hunting clubs and involved in a representative position for the community in the area. I've just been fragged with phone calls and text messages and everything, trying to help people get set up with what to do. The hardest thing has been that we don't know what to do until the details came out. The latest timeline I believe we have is along the lines that I'll just refer to them as the father and the son because I can't remember their names, and people who engage in terrorism don't deserve their names to be repeated. So the father applied for a license in 2015. From what we can work out, that was approved and not actually issued because he, as a lot of firearms owners know, it's a requirement that you actually go and get the little photo taken. So that license application expired because he didn't get his photo taken. Nothing came of that. In 2020, it appears that he applied again and was, at the time, it would appear probably not approved. The question now comes up, and we'll talk about NCAT a little bit more later, but the question is as to how it was not approved until 2023. So from an initial application in 2020, as most of our listeners would know, it's usually in New South Wales a 2-month, 8-week to maybe 3-month, 12-weekish kind of process to get a license approved if everything goes well. The immediate question is, what in the world caused the pause from 2020 with the initial application to 2023 when it was finally issued? In the middle of that, as has been pointed out now by a few, in 2021 was the Edwards inquiry, which at the time revealed a whole raft of failings by New South Wales Police and the Registry in their administration of Mr. Edwards' application, NCAT appeal, and then granting him I believe, a Category H licence, which he then went on to kill his children with. At the same time period, it would appear that the father of these two terrorists has got through with his being approved. The timeline that really messes up their story of, they just didn't know that and they hadn't linked up the information between the security networks, is that was after the time that the son had been under investigation. So my read on it, and this is purely my interpretation, I could be wrong, I'm happy for an investigation or a royal inquest to do the due diligence and prove me wrong. It would appear that in 2020, when the father applied for his license, the police system probably did flag that his son was a person of concern, or that he was associating with other people of concern, and then on NCAT they've appealed it and then given him the license. So for us now to be thrown down the gurgler for what would appear to be stacking up on one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, there are the system's failings to enforce existing laws, is pretty hard to swallow.
Yeah, everything you just said, completely agree with. It seems that there has been a massive shortcoming from our government agencies. And unfortunately, I feel that we are going to pay the price here, because let's talk about some of that terminology that I've seen come, and especially from our Premier, Chris Minns, which is extremely disappointing. I think it's really shown his true colours as an absolute turncoat. And from 2 months ago, not even a month ago, where he was in full support of the hunting and conservation bill and expanding the access and whatnot for hunters, he has now gone the complete opposite direction. And not only is he calling for this quick reform, so an emergency cabinet meeting was held last night, I think the night before and last night. That now has sped up the timeline, and he's bringing back Parliament on the 22nd, which is in 5 days' time. Now, I also feel the extreme speed of this is because he doesn't want the blowback and the public criticism, which is coming thick and fast, in my opinion, from everything that I'm seeing on social media. And I take that with a grain of salt because of algorithms, and they tend to show you what you want to see. But, for example, I know I wrote to him immediately, and the response I got is it can take up to 20 days for him to get back. Now, okay, if you can't even respond to correspondence from your constituents in this set period, why is it that you are rushing through with these and not getting any community feedback whatsoever? Now, I've got a couple of feelings about this, and I do think that it is because that I honestly feel that the Prime Minister and Chris Minns, their political careers went up on Sunday. That's it. They're done. So the next opportunity for an election, they both will be gone. And I think that's coming thick and fast. And I think this is their way of maybe leaving a legacy and being memorable or known. I honestly feel that's the way or the push there, because let's talk about some of the language he's used, especially today. He's talked about that WA hasn't gone hard enough with their firearms limits. Now, that we know is 5 per person. Man, what are we talking here potentially? And I know we're speculating. We don't know. There's nothing that's been officially said. But for me, him saying that, having concerns that this whole terrorist act was done with a rifle and a shotgun, so 2 firearms, this concerns me that they're going to look at it and go, potentially 2's too many, or 2's the max that anyone can have. The other comment is that he's gone away and said that recreational hunters, there is no need to have a firearm. The only people that should have firearms are landholders. Hold on, mate, you've done a complete backflip for one. Yes, it's a tragedy, 100%. We should absolutely condemn, denounce, do everything we can to make sure this is never going on again. There is a lot of shortfallings here, including what the government has allowed. And we talked about we're about to talk about some protests and things like that. But having protests where I saw a photo today, and I don't know how accurate it was, but of the sun allegedly, and as I said, I don't know how real it was, but it was of the sun. It was saying that the sun was at a pro-Palestine rally with an ISIS flag, and that was allowed. There was no consequences. There was no look in. If this is true, and again, it's alleged at the moment because we don't know, but if this is all true, I feel like they're pushing these gun laws very quickly to hide the shortcomings of what's happened. And even if it does come out that the damage has already been done to firearms owners or the actual reforms that they want to put in, they are massive just concerns that I think every firearms owner across the country needs to be thinking and really taking action on. And we'll talk about that a little bit later of what you can do as best we can. But, mate, for me, this is one big concern that we need to really look at and go, hey, how is it that our media especially, and this is where, again, I know we've got our firearms representation is all saying we're doing this behind the scenes and we're doing this and we're doing this. That's fantastic. All I've heard in the media so far is majority, especially the big stuff, is coming from the wrong side of the argument, pushing things like, there's 4 million guns in Australia. There's 325 licensed firearms owners here in New South Wales. And using that as a scare tactic instead of saying, hey, there's 4 million guns here in Australia. If we were the problem, you'd know about it. There's 325,000 firearms licenses. That means there's 324,999 people who have not done the wrong thing, but we're going to demonize those numbers. Where are our bodies getting on the mainstream TV talking about this? Because that's my great concern.
Yeah, so again, as with the whole thing, there's so much in it and so many angles and so many different opinions of how we should do it, what we should do. Should we quietly sort it behind the scenes so that we can maybe leverage individual ministers to go against something, or should we be lobbying the people? Or big picture, I think you're 100% correct that the rush to get this through is partially legacy. I think you're right. I think Chris Minns doesn't have a great deal to show for what it is. As happens with all change of governments from a previously Liberal government, he swept in and kind of promised the world, and as happens, things are slow. He hasn't done much. Albo's much the same. Albanese has kind of come to it as the prime ministership that all the promises and all the amazing everything. Not amazing much has happened, and a lot of pretty obvious systemic backward steps have happened on his watch. So there's a bit in it. I couldn't be quoted on it, but I've got a strong recollection somewhere back when Albanese first came to the prime ministership. He actually referenced John Howard as one of his inspirations as a former prime minister, and I would dearly love to have been a fly on the wall in the room the other day when John Howard actually came out and said, "Look, this is a distraction issue. Gun laws are not the issue here. You should be focusing on the bigger cultural issues." I think that would have gone down like a bloody fishing sinker. But anyway, I think the overall, the lack of interest in engaging with the community at large, and that's not just the firearms owning community, that's the community at large. There's been almost no time. There's been next to no time, and as I said before, fundamentally, there's been no time with the families and the victims of this, aside from a few choice photo ops. I firmly believe the intention is to ram it through as quickly as they can. And to go back to your point earlier of the protesting, one that really concerned me about the Premier's address today, obviously the firearms restrictions themselves concerned me. One that concerned me massively, as a person who has formerly chucked the uniform on and stood for things that I'm proud of in this country, I was horrified to hear him use the excuse of the current terror threat level to ban and to push the police to not approve any protest in the foreseeable future. Because that is, I have no doubt in my mind, that is purely to stop the law-abiding firearms owners of this nation doing similar to they did when Barry Unsworth first tried back before Port Arthur, when he first tried to take away a lot of our firearms, and staging a very well-organised, very peaceful protest. I have no doubt in my mind, I know a few people have kind of said in a couple of conversations, it's because we're sick of the pro-Palestine protests and this, that, and the other. I said, well, Mr. Minns has not taken the people's fed-upness with those protests at any point previously to ban those protests. He's allowed all of them to happen. Now, when it's politically expedient to him to hide himself and his other ministers from any kind of public demonstration against what they're about to ram through, that sits terribly with me, because like it or lump it, and there's plenty of protests that go on in this country that I don't side with, I firmly believe that our right to protest as individuals, to organise ourselves and represent ourselves directly to the politicians who are making these decisions in a protesting form, is one of the great rights that we should have enshrined and perpetually protected. It was one of my biggest bugbears with COVID, that COVID was used as an excuse to stop public protest. And I firmly believe that is just a foil over the Christmas period under the guise of security and all of the other good stuff, that they are just using that as an excuse to stop us actually getting ourselves together and demonstrating in one of the few ways we have available to us. That's not sitting very happily with me at the moment, but because I can't go and have a protest, I'm hamstrung in one of my ways that I can express that displeasure. So I'm here on a podcast.
Well, I mean, that's it, because it's a double-edged sword. I agree about the protests. I personally believe our protests should look a little bit different. I don't think we should be protesting anything that has not got anything to do directly with what is happening here in Australia. I don't think we should be protesting anything around the world that doesn't concern us, especially on the other side. I also feel that if protests should also potentially, you almost sell tickets and that you pay to go, so that there's numbers, there's extra security, because at the moment all these protests are paid for by the taxpayer for increased police presence, et cetera, I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it's fair when it's done weekly to pester and annoy to get a certain response. And I get that's what protests are designed to do. But I think there also has to be a limit and some responsibility go back onto the community or the people that want to engage in that protest as well. For this, I would be more than happy to pay $100 for a ticket to go and protest these gun reforms coming in, if that meant increased police presence, whatever it might be. My concern with the protest, if this goes on, and we've already seen some backlash here, is that people doing the wrong thing and not necessarily being firearms owners protesting for firearms, but people who are tacking on and then giving firearms owners a bad name. That it has to be a major concern. And I know that quite a few people have sort of touched base with us and said, what should we do? And I've been sort of very vocal in saying, get those letters to every single minister you possibly can. As I said, I've contacted the Premier. I shared that on my Facebook account for anyone that wants it. I will put it on the episode notes of this podcast. Get and find your both state and federal MPs and really get there. And I want your advice here and your knowledge, because, as I said, you're a very well-versed person that I like to bounce ideas off. And I know what I said to Premier Chris Minns was quite a few different points. Is the numbers, what I just quoted before, talking about 325,000 where, one incident and everybody's punished. And one of the things I went further to that, and I want to make this very clear, I am not saying I think this should happen, but I'm using it as an example of what I feel is discrimination towards firearms owners at the moment. So let me unpack this one for you. I put in my letter to Mr. Mins, would you consider saying something as silly as we are going to ban all Muslims in Australia from owning a firearms license? And I know the answer would be no, because that is discrimination and racism. However, what is different with you banning the vast majority, the 324,999 firearms owners because of one act of despicable violence? Now, if you wouldn't do it for a population group because it would be discrimination and racism, what makes this acceptable? And again, I want to make it very clear, I'm not saying that we should do that to Muslim people. I'm saying that is my example, that it would be insane for them to think like that and to put that in place for any nationality or religion. However, if you're not going to do something like that, then how is it that you can just do a blanket ban on everyone and say that's not discrimination? That's something that I included in my letter. I also talked about the facts of what I do and what person I am in the community and any leverage points that you can have. I know if you work in an area that is, a high needs area for the government, use that. There's a potential I'll resign. I'll go find another job. I'll go into the private sector. Anything to make them potentially reposition where they are. The other one I've clearly said is if this goes through, I most definitely will never vote for your party ever again. And I will be voting for One Nation. And I'm saying I will be voting for One Nation for two reasons. I think both major parties have seen a significant shift in the political atmosphere at the moment, and there is a major, major upswing for the One Nation Party, whether you agree with all their policies or not. And I know there'll be some shooters out there going, stick with SFFP. Look, and I know you ran for them. For me personally, I don't think they have the legs and the numbers to actually get something done. And I do feel if you are watching what's going on, One Nation is getting some major traction and momentum, and they could be someone that can actually be a new major. And that, especially when Pauline's coming out saying that she's backing firearms and don't take firearms. Hey, you know what? This is something that I'm hearing it from her. I'm seeing her on TV doing it. I'm not seeing other people. I'm sorry, guys, but I am trying to protect my way of life. I'm trying to go where I'm putting my eggs in baskets that I feel have the most chance of being successful. And at this stage, I know it's not Liberal and I know it's not Labor. And unfortunately, I don't see any other thing. I know I've had Borsak Jr. on here from SFFP. I know I've had John Ruddock from Libertarian. I'm sorry, guys. You aren't seeming to be anyone at the moment that I feel has the gas in the tank to actually make a significant change and difference in the current circumstances. On top of that, again, going back to why are law-abiding people punished? Giving analogies. If you have someone that drives at 200 kilometers an hour, you don't ban all guns and say, all right, the rest of the population now has to ride bikes for everyone. Like, I know it's a silly example because people haven't died from that, but it's one that I think we need to do our absolute best here to show the ramifications or the repercussions from voters. Because let's be real, that's all they care about. And this knee-jerk reaction is to try and appease as many people as possible. And I actually think in the community, they've done themselves a real disservice. And the more people that can show that, the more chance we've got of them going, oops, I think we need to just slow down a little bit here.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally hit the nail on the head. First and foremost, the question at the start was kind of like, what can people do? The number one is, where possible, stay calm and think about what you're going to do. And by stay calm, I mean, I don't by any stretch mean staying active. Calm yourself down. If you're halfway through firing off a text, because as you've said with the protest as a prime example, protest and counter-protesters and false protesters is how most things come unstuck. So if we were to go through, and I had the conversations with a few people already, were it to come to the point that a rally were to be had, one of the incredibly important things we would have to do within the firearms, if it was a protest to be held, and we're probably not going to get the timeline to do one. Keep your ears to the ground, though, because if this thing doesn't get rammed through and we have the capacity to do it, a peaceful protest is an important part of what we can do. But as I'm about to explain, it needs to be done incredibly well. So it would need to be done whereby people suck up a little bit of their ego and put themselves as willing to work together. You are going to have a dress code. You are going to have something along the lines of, do not have someone check over what you're wearing. Don't wear a really ridiculous anti-Islam F off, we're full, any of that stuff, because that doesn't help. As much as that may be the thing that makes you feel good, if it makes you feel happy about yourself and like you're doing a bit, put it on in the mirror, then take it off, and then put a respectable shirt on, because you weaken the own argument. The same thing, too, is the retaliatory stuff, which I sincerely hope does not escalate in Sydney and across Australia. But things like parts of pigs' bodies being scattered across Muslim graves in retaliation. Now, as a knee-jerk emotional response, I can understand how people would think that would make them feel better. Oh, we'll show those guys, we'll show them that. The biggest concern is from my point of view, is for people to make sure you stay calm, think empathetically, and that doesn't mean you have to agree with the other side, but think about how your actions are going to affect them. And I think very often we sell ourselves a little bit short because we go for a really cheap thrill of a really short-term, this will really annoy them if I say this. But it doesn't make us look good. It doesn't make us look smart. It doesn't make us look considered or respectable. So things like that where, in the short term, this will really annoy them. Big picture, if you were to go through, how's that going to feel on the other side? So let's put it with the exact context we have right now. There are a lot of people of Islamic descent in this country who work damn hard to be good parts of society. There are also quite obviously extremist elements that we have a problem with. If you were to be, and put yourself for this as an extreme example, to be the grandson of a bloke who came here and worked damn hard, had a shop, worked hard, raised his kids have now raised you as his grandchild in this country, and after you yourself are feeling traumatized and upset and hurt by the incidents on Bondi the other day, you then find out that someone's gone and scattered pig's head and pig's blood all over your grandfather. You're not going to come to our side and say, I understand why they did it. That's going to exacerbate the issue and make the retaliation worse. It's a thing that as law-abiding firearms owners is in this country, we pretty well fight most of our battles with two hands tied behind our back. We can't say the same things to the other guys that they say to us because they are perceived to not be armed, and if we hit back at them with half the vitriol they hit at us, we would probably be in jail on threats. Some of the things that have been said to me by members of other political parties locally, there was one incident with a Greens member on a radio interview. I've stepped up to the plate to try to do as many radio snippets as I can. Funnily enough, the local ABC has actually been quite good with giving me a genuine right of reply. Some of the shots across the bows about, Sue Higginson, who's an MLC for the Greens, she's fired a shot across the bows about all of the comments that are coming from the pro-shooting lobby, as they always like to call us, are bullying and aggressive in their approach. I rebutted it immediately, but I had to bite my tongue in how I rebutted it, because I had to say that for someone who is calling for a calm and considered adult conversation about issues that need to be addressed, that was an immature and unseemly. I had a whole heap of other things I wanted to say about that petty low blow, but I had to dial it back. And I think that's a very important part of anyone who's going to write comments on Facebook, write things to your local member, write them to ministers, is to sit back. So first of all, be calm. Be empathetic as to how the message is going to be received, because jumping onto Chris Means and calling him a pack of whatever you want to call him and this, that, and the other is not going to help. As you said, put ways to put your position as a community member and your value to the community outside of your owning of firearms. Emphasise that. I don't like in my personal life leaning on the veterans thing, but I've used it to give myself credibility with this as a veteran who has served in the Australian Armed Forces overseas on operations to defend the nation. I'll use that if it helps get my point across with this. And exactly as you said, try to find not too abstract, but analogies away from the firearms that can highlight to people the unfairness of what we're about to face. Because as you've said with cars, and the funny thing with cars in this country is cars have been used in gazetted terrorist incidents before. Gargazoulis in Melbourne used a Holden Commodore to run over and kill 6 people in what was a gazetted, at the time, I think they've since redacted it to a domestic incident, but it was deemed to be a terrorist incident at the time because of his ideology. We didn't go through and take away everyone's Holden Commodores. We didn't go through and say that no one can own a Holden Commodore ever again and this, that, and the other, and Holden Commodores can't be in the cities. The other last point I'd say is, where possible, learn the facts and the numbers. Even if you've got to have a notepad or a thing that where you got them, so that in debates you can come across as being genuinely educated and accurately informed on the numbers of how many firearms owners there are. As you said before, it's a hard one to point out, but it was thrown back at me in a radio interview today about how many firearms there are in certain areas. I hope I worded it well, but I've said what I've said now, and the record will state it. But it was along the lines of, I can have 100 firearms, and my neighbours, because they were pushing the issue that, people don't even know their neighbours have 100 firearms. And I said, well, if I have 100 firearms and I've stored them so safely and securely and I handle them in such a manner that my neighbours don't know, they're obviously no concern to my neighbours because they're obviously no threat to my neighbours. It would be no different if I were a chainsaw collector and had 800 chainsaws on a shelf under my house in a workshop that I store and look after correctly and don't use to threaten or endanger anyone else. It's no one's business that I have 800 chainsaws. And I think they're just a few tips that people can go through. The other last one maybe is just, it's going to be a grind, and whether it's a sprint or whether it's a marathon, use the time you can to be putting the effort in. We've got one shot at this now. We've got a fairly limited timeline, I think, on it. Liking and sharing subscriptions and signing petitions are good, and they're all useful. I would never say for the 2 seconds it takes you to sign an online petition, they may not be the most useful thing, but it's still 2 seconds, so just do it and get them across the line. Make sure you read what you're signing. There are a few of them that I've kind of seen shared around that actually, in the reading of what the petition is for, they're not bad, but they're not actually worded as well as you might like for the message you want to get across. And the number one is, as you've said before, jump on the New South Wales parliamentary site and the federal, because this is a federal issue as well. The federal government is looking at an overarching national firearms agreement redraw. Find your members, find your ministers, and just put, you don't have to feel like you have to write an epic novel. You don't have to cover all the points. If you can only cover one point, you cover that well. That's far more important, that you actually then get it covered. Like, one point covered well in a message that you've sent is better, far, far, far better than 100 points covered really well in a message you never sent. And try to, I think that's my tips. I'm not the expert on it, but I'm certainly going to give it a crack at doing what we can do for it.
I'll go one more from what you've said. I agree with everything you just said. The only difference is I would be putting everything through AI. Literally copy paste what you have written, put it into any of your AIs, ChatGPT, Grok, whatever you prefer, Perplexity, doesn't matter which one, and ask it to have a respectful tone. Mm-hmm. I would ask it to have a professional vibe, and I would probably ask it to also make it persuasive. And if you are doing those 3 things, I feel you will get a polished letter that, no matter what your academic ability or your education levels or your literacy skills, that you will be able to produce something that is a quality piece in order to send that to your local, state, federal, any politician you can get your hands on. And I don't mean that in a physical way, obviously. Get that
that would go badly.
No, don't do that, and get that across. I think it's really, really important that we do a few different things. And I wanted to highlight something you just said. You said you heard about people like there's this stupid thing about let's go bash an Arab or something I saw come through today. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. How can we as firearms owners be out there, and I'm not saying anyone's doing this, but I'm saying if you were, how can you condone and target a group for the actions of one individual? Because guess what? Flip that around, and we are arguing the exact same point. We are saying don't punish all us law-abiding firearms owners because of one bad person. Well, then you can't have, but let's blame all Arabs or Muslims because of one bad person. They go hand in hand. Take a moment, take a breath. I get people are frustrated. I get people are angry. Hey, I am one of you. I am really annoyed that we have been put into this position for two dead set scumbags. However, it is not all of us. There is far more good than the bad. And this is the time where we need to shine that light and show that we are good, great people and that we don't deserve the persecution that is coming our way on the back of these two scumbags. So for me, the message is pretty clear. I'm with Felix. Be mindful of what you're signing. Something's better than nothing. Unfortunately, again, I haven't seen one big one. I've seen multiple small different ones coming from all angles. I don't think that as a firearms community does us well. I'd love to see one of our major bodies put one out there and try and push it. I would love to see some more action coming from them. And this is a call out. If anyone knows any one of those parties, let's get them in front of mainstream media, get front and center, do more. Or you know what? If you can't do more, get people that can. Pauline's got plenty of screen time at the moment compared to the other politicians. Reach out to her, get some backing, equip her with a little bit more information so that she can bear the sword for this fight. It's time to bury the pride. It's time to work together as best we can and make sure that we just do everything in our power legally and make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to diminish our reputation, because that's what we've got to rely on at the moment. Mate, I think I have covered everything that I wanted to say. I'm pretty sure you probably have as well.
I think that's the gist of the last one I'll put in there. It was one I was going to bring up earlier with the political thing. And I think you are correct and on par with what a lot of shooters in the community and I think just general kind of centre-line, outdoor-loving, Aussie lifestyle-loving Australians are feeling is that the push has been taken fairly rapidly by one nation. The majors have really slipped into a point of bordering on irrelevance, but harmful irrelevance. It doesn't mean we can ignore them. My tip would be with the parties and with the shooters and with the libertarians and there are some other other parties of a similar ilk, contact them as well. Because even if you've come to the point that you have decided that one nation is where it's going, or that another party is where it's going, or because the Nationals have moved out of lockstep with the Liberals in a very big way on this, and at the federal level have come much further out to stand on our side than I would have expected they might have. Make sure you contact all of them. So even if you go through and two local identities as well, because even if you know that there's a regular Liberal bloke who's not the current member, but he's still a bloke, contact them as well. All their contact information is available. Get in touch with them and let them know where you're at. So even if it's at the point of saying, hey, Pauline, you're going to have mine at the next federal. I'm very impressed with what you've done. These are my concerns, and I would expect the following of you as well. Because one that we fall foul of, I think, a little bit, and it's happened in the last few years, and we can go into a whole nother podcast on discussing the history of the parties at this national, state, everything levels. People have kind of got disgruntled with one of the minor parties and jumped immediately wholehearted to another party, and not necessarily held them to account for holding up the ideals of what they hoped they would do. So don't reveal to anyone necessarily that they've got your vote yet. Let them know you're impressed by what they're doing. Let them know you're not impressed. I've got a fair few people that, with my little foray with the last election, came forward and said, mate, we were pretty impressed with what you did. We weren't quite at the point of necessarily giving you our number one, but we led our local. There was one bloke I know that had been, since the day he could first vote, he'd been Liberal. His whole generation, they'd all been Liberals. He didn't quite get to the point of not giving Liberal his number one, but he sent the Liberal candidate a message and said, hey, I very nearly put you as the number two and put another bloke first. And I know for a fact from having talked to that candidate, that carried a lot of weight. So even if there are people that you're not going to vote for, I've gone as far as sending emails and engaging with the Greens as well. And I know full well they know who I am, that my opinion doesn't matter to them. I have still gone on the record that I have said I am not, especially with the Greens too from the conservation side, is that you can point out the fact that you've gone through, and while you may not think that hunters have a value, you're about to willingly move towards disarming X number of thousand hunters across New South Wales. I would be curious to know what your opinion on how you're going to fund the feral animal control that those hunters have been doing. There's all kinds of different angles, but fundamentally, as we said, if you don't have the time, and all in all, we don't have the time for this one's going to be a fairly short, sharp one, and we need to get it done. Focus on the bits you can do really well and genuinely watching what all of the politicians do at the different levels with it. Because when it comes to a vote, the results of who voted for what, unless they move to an anonymous conscious vote, the results will be made available. And if you have had a response, that was the other tip I was going to say too, make sure you request in all of your political correspondence that you would like a response from them. Have their response, print a copy, and then watch the way the buggers vote. Because there are a lot of time they'll pay lip service just to give you the good happy clappies. I've seen quite a few people on shooting forums thus far from this already publishing the responses they've had from different members. If you actually read between the lines, a lot of them are sitting smack bang on the fence. They're not committing one way or the other. They pay a lot of lip service to respecting law-abiding firearms owners, but they're sitting smack bang on the fence, which gives them the ability to move. Hold them to account afterwards. If you were given a message that implied they were going to vote one way, and they then voted against what they told you they would do, get the next message to them and hold them to account. Because the biggest problem I think we have, Ryan Callan from the Meat Eater crew in America points out fantastically, our elected representatives are elected representatives, even if you didn't vote for them. So they have a responsibility to engage with the community. And while you may have a Greens member locally who couldn't give a tinker's toss about law-abiding firearms owners, they still have a responsibility to engage with you as one of their constituents. And it's up to us to hold them to account, not hold to account the ones we don't like and let the ones we do like slide because they're the guy we like. Because big picture, however this goes over the next while, end of this year, maybe into next year, we'll see what happens. I think this, if nothing else, will make whatever is left of the law-abiding firearms community in New South Wales, hopefully, politically much more astute and engaged. I just hope there's something left to be engaged.
I think you're right. It's one that I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I am very concerned. I don't think the fight's over. I think it's just beginning. I think it's hopefully is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm concerned that they're trying to make it a sprint for that very reason. Mm-hmm. And I think what we need now, and something we've been really poor at as shooters and hunters, is actually getting off our backsides and taking action. So I encourage everybody, share the podcast, share some tips. I don't care if it's mine, others, letters, whatever. Get people active. If you know a firearms owner, get into them, get them to send some letters, help them draft it. If you've got to hold your mate's hand because he's not as doesn't want to put himself out there as much as you do, go over to his house, crack a beer, write the damn letter, read it when you're sober, and then send it through. Do whatever we need to do here. The more we contact, the more letters we write, and the more numbers that we have showing this is going to be what we need to do. All right, so get active. And I think that's the way I want to wrap this one up, mate, is just encouraging everybody out there, get active and promote everybody to get active as well. Felix, appreciate your time, mate, and your advice coming on tonight. And hopefully we'll have this one out ASAP and hopefully it gets some traction. And we just do what we can here.
That's it. Cheers, mate. Good luck, everyone. We'll see you on the other side.
All right, guys. All the best. Strap yourself in. Let's go. You've been listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt. Thanks for tuning in and can't wait to catch you next time. But in the meantime, if you want more, you can find it at linktr.ee/Australian Hunting and Beyond. That will give you our YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, you name it. We'll catch you next time.